Oh, hey. I know what you're probably thinking right now. Geez, Kyle, I'm jealous. You're not on the planet Earth. Everything seems like it's more or less on fire right now. And hey, I don't blame you, but I have to get back to the facility. I was on a little trip, office hours is calling and all. So I know everything seems like it's on fire right now, and we will be talking a little bit about that, of course. But for now, we have to get back to the facility to talk about some topics on today's office hours. Wait, how long is it going to take me to get back? Wouldn't the travel time that I would have to travel from here to be like... Hello and welcome. I know, it's really fast spaceship. Hello and welcome to Office Hours, the live version of the facility where old Professor Kyle takes all your comments, questions, and comments about my hair and face, and I try to elaborate on them in a fun and fascinating way. And we also take a number of topics, the week's or the day's topics, and we go over them. Today will be, of course, no different. We will be talking about, in just a second, a physics-breaking box. We'll also be talking about a fun little term that I learned, and now I want to learn more about them, called Recursive Islands. We'll also be talking about one of your comments from the last episode of the facility, all about the mighty basilisk. And we'll be talking about how all of this stuff has been actually working. All the lockdowns, the social distancing, has it been working? There's 2 new studies that we're going to go through, and we can see just how much they have or have not been working. But before we get to that, I want to mention that thank you already to the people who are donating in Super Chat today. It has to be said, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but of course, there's a lot bigger of a conversation going on right now, especially about discrimination and racism in America and all across the world. And though I be but a tiny science boy, I figured I could help do my part, and I found a organization that I think is worthy of the cause. This is the Center for Policing Equity. This is a data science-driven nonprofit that uses data science and a bunch of what they call justice nerds to analyze the data in regards to policing, to then advise and put forward real policy changes that are backed up by the data. Where is the bias? Who is being targeted? Who isn't being targeted? What works? What doesn't? Tracks it all using the powers of science and not relying on charged political ideas or inherent human bias. So all the super chats today, whatever that number ends up being, I will check it. Whatever that number ends up being today, I will be donating that to the Center for Policing Equity. So with that, we can talk a little bit more about it, but this is a science show. Let's move on to our first topic. Is this box breaking physics? So a number of you sent this to me, and, oh, sorry, my invisible mug's in the shot. A number of you sent this viral video to me, and it is of a box jumping out and then back into the back of a truck on a highway. And let's watch that now just so we have some context. Is it breaking ye olde physics? Okay, so now when you see it happen, it almost looks like, twice in a row, it almost looks like, I don't know, like a ghost is pushing it back in or something. Is it a ghost? Is it breaking physics? Well, A, no, it's never a ghost. Nothing has ever been a ghost, ever, because ghosts aren't real and don't exist. But what could be going on here? So I think that this is not a fake video. Let's watch it a little bit more closely. What do we see? Well, it looks like a very light box. By the way, it tumbles out of the truck. It looks to be made of some light material, possibly styrofoam. When it happens the second time, you see some detritus knocked off of the flow and vortices. And you see this, and we study this using air tunnels, wind tunnels, when we design cars and trucks and whatnot. And the car has a stream of air going up and over the top, and then at the back it forms these little swirls, and these swirls can be quite a large source of drag, so much so that at higher speeds it will affect fuel economy, because the drag force on the car is being added to, not just punching your way through the momentum of the air, but also this low pressure zone at the back of the car. And So if you put those two things together, a very light box falling out of a truck into where you'd exactly expect the vortices to be, I don't think it's all that crazy to think that a light, perhaps styrofoam box could be pushed back into the truck by some vortices, especially it's on the highway at high velocity. So I do not think this is a fake video. I think this is a good example of a very fun, physicsy, viral video. And, again, it can't be ghosts. You know why? Because nothing's ever been ghosts. Let's go to the chat. So, like I said, all the donos today, as Twitch streamers call them, let me get my invisible cup, will be going to the Center for Policing Equity, and let's see what you have to say in the chat. Maximus says, is there any scientific merit to after images like we see in the anime? Now, I've researched this a number of times because I've been asked about after images a lot over the years. The problem is that there isn't a thing where you move so fast you retain an image. Which is to say that you can move so fast that you blur, and you can move so fast past someone's field of view that you could beat their frame rate, so to speak. We call it the critical fusion frequency when we study these things. And so if something was going like 500 miles an hour right past your face, it might be, thank you so much for the donations, it might be the case where it's going so fast that by the time your brain takes a frame from the universe for visual processing, it could be in and out of that frame. So if someone was going hyper fast in anime, I think it's more likely that they would be that kind of invisible movement like you see, but not the after image. To create the real after image, I think what you would need is some sort of, if you're a Dragon Ball Z nerd, some sort of like solar flare like Tien does. And that is flashing your retinas with with a lot of photons all at once to so that they're excited enough that the image stays in processing for longer. Like if you ever had a camera bulb go up in your face, and you're like, oh, why didn't you tell me? And you said, I said heads up, and you're like, well, when you say heads up, I look up, and then you see that flash, and that flash stays in your eyes for a while. I think that's more likely if it was an anime style like flash bulb rather than just moving quickly. We have $10 from Hot Duelist, who says, watching this from the hospital with my girlfriend and our newborn baby girl. Hope you get to meet her at a magic event in the future. I absolutely do too. Thank you for the donation. Again, going to a cause today. Landy Manderson, one of my Professor Emeritus at the facility, donates $50. Thank you so much. Manuel C3 says, Kyle, do you play chess? I actually don't. I never learned how to play, and so I never got into it. I played checkers a lot, and I'm sure I could learn it, but then Magic the Gathering was kind of my chess of choice, so to speak. John Hawley says, I know you're into Magic the Gathering, as you say, but do you play Dungeons and Dragons at all? If so, what is your favorite class? I kind of picked one Wizards of the Coast thing to do, and that wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, it was Magic. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I feel like I could do it because I like doing characters and stuff, and I've tried doing an entire DM by myself, but I won't bore you with that right now, unless you really want. Growing Answers with a $25 donation, thank you so much. I want to know your thoughts on gravity batteries. Do you think it would be a feasible option in single homes to store energy? Would a battery bank be more efficient? I assume more energy is lost in mechanical translation. So I'm guessing you're talking about cheaply made sources of energy that could, say, gravity batteries, kind of like, actually, I don't know exactly what you mean. You could put something like a turbine underneath a waterfall to use that gravity, that momentum, or you could have things dropping all the time, or a weight pulling something down. I think what you're getting at is that I do think it's less efficient because you are having to use some energy and do some work. I think, and some products that I've seen that are really promising are the ones that are just solar powered, very cheaply made plastic that just give a light to everyone who doesn't have one. I think that's a little bit more feasible. Jay Howard with a $50 donation. Thank you so much, Jay. Tudor says, is it possible to make a brain-computer interface with only electrical interfaces to the brain without chemical detection. That's very difficult to say. In theory, well, we do this kind of thing. So in theory, you could create a brain-machine interface that just interfaced with the brain through electrical signals alone. And we do this, and this is just one example. We use transcranial magnetic imaging resonance. It's something like that. I forget it now because I'm put on the spot. But we use strong magnets, and we direct the magnetic fields at certain parts of the brain. And what that does is, because the magnetic field is in a certain part of the brain, and blood is flowing through the brain, and blood is conductive, as is water, which a lot of what blood is water. Because that's conductive, it creates its own electric field. So by shooting magnetism at someone, you can create an electrical field in their body, and therefore their brain. And by doing this, you can induce activity in certain parts of the brain. So there's fascinating studies where people use this imaging to activate certain parts of the brain to make them literally think differently. So you could turn off someone's moral reasoning or change their ability to do math by firing magnetism like Magneto at a certain part of the brain, which I think is freaking awesome. So to answer your question, Tudor, yes, I think you can do it without chemicals. Joe Schmo with the 50 says, I want to put some minds at ease about Roko's basilisk. In order to make a decision about manipulating the past to effect when it comes into existence, it would have to simulate itself coming into existence at different points in time. Now, I don't know if that's an actual way around that, Joe, because part of the argument for this very scary thing, the basilisk, and we'll get to that, is that it has, in this thought experiment, it just has sufficient power in that it can arbitrarily simulate anything, more or less. So it can still simulate itself at different points in the past to know what it would do in the future and all that kind of thing. I know that's not super technologically feasible, but this is an imagined scenario past a singularity. The people that think hard about this for some reason are very obsessed with the singularity and Ray Kurzweil and stuff. So they imagine this is past the point where technological evolution surpasses anything we've ever done and we become gods, basically. And then you have the basilisk, who you may or may not worship. We have Lin Yin Chen with a 5. Thanks for not muting me, so now I can super chat you. Merry Christmas. What month is it for you? There. Mega Holmes says 5G is what that is about. The manipulation of matter on a fine scale, magnetic scaffolding and some spontaneous matter creation and transmutation through a microwave medium. No. As we went through in a previous episode, the bandwidths and the frequencies, the energy of the radiation here that we're talking about with cell phone towers, cell phones, yes, even 5G, is not on the level of physically interacting with atoms and molecules enough to rearrange them. And when you say spontaneous matter generation, that also doesn't happen in the universe. Everything comes from somewhere, even particle-antiparticles that pop into existence in pairs. They still come from somewhere. So I feel like you're getting on the 5G train, which is not... I'm not bashing you here. I'm just saying you might want to check your sources because a lot of the through lines in that argument don't make sense in the physical universe. So with that, let's go to our second topic, which is here. Okay, so like I said, and I'm not the best person to be talking about this. There's a lot of skinny white guys on the internet. I acknowledge that. But I felt like I wanted to say something and do something. Like I said, the super chats today are being donated to the Center for Policing Equity. And what really caught me when I was researching them was this phrase: in our darkest moments, science illuminates our path to justice. And I think people get caught up about a supposed separation between science and morality. But a lot of philosophers that I like seem to make the argument, and I would too, is that when it comes down to it, you can start operationalizing these variables. And what that means in graduate student speak is giving some complex variable, start giving it ways to be measured. So if you're to measure, for example, violence in the media, you would have to give like, okay, well, it shows someone being attacked once, twice, 3 times, and then that would go into your metric. So what I think you can do with morality, policing, these kind of questions is start operationalizing it and dig into the data and dig into our bias to hopefully come up with better solutions than solutions that are just off the top of your head or emotional. Again, I'm not the best person to be talking about this, but it is unequivocally true that in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, people of color are discriminated against and find themselves in higher education less than just about anybody. You can hear stories about this anywhere. Similar thing happens to women, but especially women of color and people of color. So there is undoubtedly bias that is driving the problems that we're having today. And I believe that through science, through data gathering, through actual interrogation of these questions, we can come up with better answers, better policy decisions than just ones off the top of their head or ones that are politically motivated or make you feel good. So that's what I want to try to do today. I don't have a lot more to say. If you want to support policing equity, you can. Please do. The link is in the description of this video. Let's go back to the chat, which is there. So what does the chat have to say? John Price says, dude, it's the most glorious flow of hair. I know. And we had a $25 donation from earlier, says, it's already rendered, says, do you accept fan art via the mail? No, but you can tweet it at me. Did you know that P.O. boxes cost money? Randy Ewing says, I know I'm lagging a bit here, forgive me. Randy Ewing says, science knows no race. We are one in our pursuit of knowledge. All hail the basilisk. I can't advocate for the basilisk or not. Now I should be lagging a little bit less. Let's see. BizGhost says, in regards to a question a few weeks back, as DNA degrades, does it degrade uniformly? Or can we piece together components of DNA that passed its half-life? That is a very good question. I don't know. I'm gonna guess that it's more or less random, where the base pairs are breaking up randomly. It would be kind of weird if it degraded uniformly. And actually, when you do statistical analyses of half-life for example, radioactive elements, hunks of radioactive material, you have to consider the number of particles that randomly leave the sample. So it's not, the chunk on the bottom left or the chunk with a certain energy. It is, in this hunk of whatever, a random number of particles will be pew, 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 shot out. So I'm going to guess the degradation of DNA is also random, which would make it much harder to piece together because you couldn't have some model of how it degrades and then you could rebuild from there. You would have to rebuild. The problem is that we could rebuild some of these DNA sequences if we had the entire genome, right? But again, because of the degradation over time, we don't have a full T-Rex genome or what have you. I want one, and we're... Kevin, T-Rex genome, write it down. And we don't have one yet, but that's something that we would need to see where the degradation happened and then piece it back together nanotechnology-wise. John73 with the $37.73 donation. Love it. What are your thoughts on the future of human evolution, given that technology has eliminated or so drastically changed the usual selection pressures that would apply to us in nature? I agree, John, that human evolution has definitely taken a different course than it would have if we didn't have technology. But this is a common argument that I think can easily fall to the side of, well, humans stopped evolving. Well, that's not true. It's just not going to be as apparent, and evolution is never going to be super apparent. Like one day we have 3 legs. It's never going to happen. I mean, think of how long we've had civilization. 10,000 years or so with agriculture. Now think of how long we've had real life-changing technology. A couple hundred years? Evolution takes hundreds of thousands or millions of years and thousands of generations. And so we haven't even lived through a time scale that would allow for significant evolution to happen, to go from, say, a proto-chimpanzee or human to human as they speciate. So we haven't been on that time scale yet to see something drastic. However, we know humans are evolving. I mean, lactose intolerance, for one, is an evolutionary trait that some people have, some populations have, and some don't. Humans are changing all the time. If you go down to the genetic level, you can see this in real time. If you study bacteria, you can see how evolution is happening in real time. But to see and to guess what the course of human evolution would be over time with technology, that's hard, because it would take so much longer than the rapidity of technological increase so far outpaces how the human body changes over time. So it would be impossible to say. I want wings. Wangtorio Jackson, groovy, says, you mentioned that there's some philosophers that you like. What are some of your favorite philosophers and why? Well, right now I've been reading a lot of Nick Bostrom's papers. He's the guy who came up with simulation theory. He's very smart. And then I also listened to Sam Harris's Waking Up, or is he calling it Making Sense? He's calling it Making Sense. Sam Harris's Making Sense podcast right now, and I like that a lot because his voice is soothing. John F. with the $200 donation for the good cause says, keep it up, you magnificent Norse god, scientist, educator, comedian, evil genius. I don't like that last part, but thank you so much for the $200 donation. Chris Bauer, who I think I highlighted in something before, says, have you read/played SCP? If so, what's your favorite? Actually, we're going to be getting to SCP in just a few minutes. Improvised Chaos says, how often should I apply all this organ oil? Look, okay, it's before you blow dry your hair, which you should be doing. Not too hot. But it's after you've kind of damp dried. So your hair's kind of damp. That's when you take a nice little dab. Sheen it up, baby. Ryan Snowberger asks, here's a question. If Atlantis indeed existed, where would it be? What's the canonical explanation of Atlantis? Is it that it's not covered in like a glass material bubble and it's just people swimming on it there? I don't know. Off the top of my head, one consideration that would determine where in the ocean it would be, if you're putting me on the spot, would be that when you look at pop culture versions of underwater stuff, it's usually bright, right? You can see things. Light does not make it very far down into the ocean, because as light travels through water, it is scattered by the water, the molecules themselves, but also debris and all the other crap in the ocean, mostly are plastic. But it's scattered such that light doesn't make it very far, and you can define different zones in the ocean by how far it makes it into. So it's not very far down before it's like black. So this would give us an indication that if Atlantis were real, it probably wouldn't be at the bottom of the sea because it would be pitch black. And the pressure would be too hard and it would be way too cold for their ripped humanoid bodies. So it's probably closer to the surface such that sunlight can still penetrate and it's not too much pressure so that the Jason Momoas of the world get crushed like a styrofoam can outside of a submarine. With that, let's move on to topic numero 3. I learned about a fun word. Today. So, this here shows this there. Now, if you see that little point in the center of that, this used to be called Vulcan Point, but it's no longer there if you want to look it up because an eruption this year evaporated that lake. But when this picture was taken, there was a little tiny island in the middle of that lake. So follow me here. You have an island in the middle of a lake, in the middle of an island, in the middle of a bigger lake, in the middle on an island. So this is what you call a recursive island. So this is an island within a lake within an island within a lake within an island. And I love this. There are a few examples of this you can find online. None of them are really named, but there's a Wikipedia page of islands in lakes on islands in lakes on islands and islands in lakes on islands and lakes. And so all the way down the line. This one, again, if you wanted to look it up, is called Vulcan Point, and it's a recursive island. And if I was going to have some kind of super evil base kind of place, recursive, you could do worse than a recursive island because this is a crater lake here. That's a site of a volcano where it was, and it was filled with water. Where's your base, Mr. Hill? You'll never find it. It's on an island within a lake within an island lake. You'll never find it. If you want to try and challenge yourself, get out of my face. If you want to try to challenge yourself, try to find some recursive islands on Google Maps, like I would do. Lin Yen Chin says, recursive, why not concentric? Well, because concentric would mean they are all centered on the same center. So concentric circles mean circle within a circle within a circle, but all those circles have the exact same center. These islands and these lakes don't have all the exact same center, or else it would look like a spiral outwards like that. PJ White says it's called a caldera. No, I do not think it is. Yeah, I think a recursive island would give at least 3 mana if you tapped it. Abdur says, new word I learned, Kyle, defenestration, death by being thrown out of a window. One of my all-time favorite words. Use it in casual conversation. You just want to defenestrate yourself real quick. I got to get out of this meeting. Sometimes you feel like defenestration. Luciano Trivelli says, what are the odds of someone having a mutation on their DNA if they have not been exposed to radiation? Well, this actually, Luciano, buonasera. This is actually the machinery of evolution. Random mutations in your DNA when you're formed as a zygote or a gamete. Zygote? Yes. Random mutations from your parents' contribution of their DNA going into you is what fuels evolution. So if mutations didn't happen, let's say it works in the way that you're proposing, everything had to be exposed to radiation. Well, if that was the case, then there would be no change, because as generations of animals and creatures continued, the next generation wouldn't have any different mutations to be selected for that just happen to do better or worse when competing with the environment and other organisms. So what actually happens, Luciano, is that whenever a creature is conceived, there are always random genetic mutations inside the DNA, and that over time, over millions of years, can be selected for. So the obvious example is there's a random genetic mutation where a giraffe has a slightly longer neck. And over time, the lineage of that population of giraffes does better than other giraffes, and so that mutation spreads throughout the giraffe community and the population, leading to widespread change and evolution over time. If you were exposed to radiation, you would introduce more of those genetic changes, but you'd have to do it like when you're developing as an embryo. People have actually done this. Before wide-scale genetic engineering of crops, farmers used to expose seeds to radioactive sources to get more mutations into their crops so that they'd have more variation to select from when they were growing. Yes, some might be horribly deformed, but some might have bigger yields, bigger corn cobs. And so we used to try to change that artificially. But evolution does that all by itself. There are just random mutations in the process that we call life. Riv Mutsu with the $21.12 donation. Thank you so much. Going towards a good cause today. Hello, Kyle. Assuming determinism guides oh no, this is going to be a smart boy question, isn't it? Assuming determinism guides shared causality, and a machine could separate and record subconscious thoughts before they had conscious thoughts, do you think society at large could handle that reality? So I think what you're getting at is that could you prove scientifically that free will doesn't exist? How you would do that, and how some experiments have done this, even though you don't need these to disprove free will in my mind, but some experiments have tried to record the intention of an action before you're consciously aware of your intention to do it. So the example is someone sitting in an MRI machine and they're looking at a screen. They have two buttons, A and B. And then the scientist tells them, okay, you have A and B. Whenever you feel like it, press either one. And with the magnetic resonance imaging, what that machine records is some brain activity prior to when you feel consciously aware of your decision. Now, if that were true, which it is, it would imply that you as an organism make decisions before you're conscious of your decisions. And then, therefore, free will doesn't exist. Now, what you're asking is, would society be able to handle that scientific fact? I don't know. It is such a hardwired illusion. I think it helps us as social creatures to consider each other as individuals and ourselves as beings with real agency over actions. I think that helps our social evolution as creatures. But a lot of our foundations of different societal institutions, like the justice system, are predicated on the idea that people have free will. You are guilty if you meant it. But if it was an accident or you were criminally insane or what have you, you can have lesser charges. I happen to think that we don't have free will based on the scientific arguments, because you can, if you pay really close, we don't have to get into it, but if you pay really, really close attention to your thoughts and your intentions and your actions, you see that they arise out of nowhere from no will of your own, and you just act on them. It's like someone getting great ideas from the unknown and just being, and your consciousness is just getting ideas from your brain. You're like, oh, yep, that's what I meant to do. Of course it was. What else would it be? So would society be able to handle it? I don't know. Would a group of scientists say we have to reform the criminal justice system to account for no free will go over well? I don't think so. But in my estimation, specifically for criminal justice, even if you think people don't have free will, I think it encourages more compassion. Someone who is a terrible criminal does something horrific. If they are just the victim of circumstance, they just happen to have the brain that they have. They don't choose their parents. They don't choose their upbringing. They don't choose their economic situation when they grow up. They don't choose the thoughts that they have, the brain that they have, where their parents went to school, any of that. They don't have any choice in who they are. I don't think any of us do. And when that's the case, can you really, truly hate someone and wish harm upon them for just being who they are? Unfortunately, I don't think so. There's still an argument to separate dangerous criminals from society, but to hate them and to punish them maliciously or having a bad luck of the draw, I don't think makes as much sense. Who else is in the chat? Stella the Legend says, Vsauce made a good video on it in Minefield. Yeah, well, I mean, everything Michael does is great, but Minefield in particular is really fantastic. So, as you've probably been seeing in the chat, and like I mentioned, we have members of the facility in the chat moderating. If you want to join the facility, get on the staff. If you want to be a researcher, an assistant, a professor emeritus, you can go to patreon.com/Kyle Hill. And when you do that, you get exclusive live streams once a month. You get videos a day early. You get behind-the-scenes posts on my Patreon page. You get to interact with me daily on our Discord. If you want to do that, you can. But today, the important thing is that all the Super Chat donations are going toward the Center for Policing Equity, because I believe data science can be the way forward in some of these tense and unfortunate situations. Shane Haar says, how is your hair black and then blonde? Ladies, do you want to tell him? Let's go on to our next topic. It's peer review time. So, on our best performing video at the facility ever, we talked about the somewhat of an internet legend, Roko's Basilisk. If you haven't seen the episode, please go watch it first. But I took one of your comments, because I have something to say about this, because people are accusing me. One of these comments from Sunken Boy. So, Sunken Boy says, this is just SCP without being anomalous. Now, I have something to say. I realize, on the face of it, there are a lot of similarities between the facility and SCP. But I am being 100% honest with you here, and I always am. A, I'm not a supervillain, and B, I had no idea what SCP was until yesterday. In my career as a science educator, I had been not doing supervillainy things, looking into, crazy technologies and weird circumstances and physics phenomena and stuff. And so when I established the facility years and years ago, before I was torn away from it into the void, I was already on this track towards exploring and explaining fascinating concepts and technologies and stuff. And then when I got back to the facility as the administrator, finally, the track just happened to be kind of an SCPE style track, but I've in fact never heard of it. I have now since heard of it, and I've looked at it, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. The way it's a group, kind of a group creative writing experiment when they come up with all these great ideas. One of my favorites was a descending staircase that never stops, and there's a face at the bottom of it without eyes. Yo, that's creepy. I don't like it. But, Sunken Boy, I have never heard of SCP. So, if I can be compared to this very well-known and very well-established thing, but I'm like the SCP, I'm like science SCP, I think that's great. And I already have a facility. All those nerds typing up stuff on no sleep on Reddit, they don't have a facility. I do. So for that, Sunken Boy, you are an honorary member of the facility. Incredible. Just incredible. Kevin, do you have the plaque this time? What just... What else does chat have to say? Improvised Chaos says, Oh, they don't have all those HDMI inputs on that monitor either. That's right. I have like 5. My Roku's back there, and whatever the new one is. Quibi? No. Crin Firelight says your cup isn't invisible anymore. Huh. Imagine that. I'm still working on the invisibility technology. It's a metamaterial. It's bending light around it, so you should be getting light from behind it, bent towards around front of it, kind of like Susan Storm would do. But sometimes, it's finicky. It's finicky. Untergang 1987 says, "Are you a dog person or a cat person?" Oh, both, but I have cats. Victor Becker says, "Is it possible to bend gravitational waves around an object?" Huh. I have no idea. I believe they pass through objects. So the way that we measure gravitational waves that recently won the Nobel Prize was you have 2 large tubes. Whoa! I'll get to that. We have 2 large tubes connected in an L shape, and there's a laser bouncing off of mirrors in them. And when a gravitational wave passes through them, it changes slightly the length of the entire apparatus. And if you have a precise enough instrument, you should be able to determine if there was some fluctuation in this length, and that would give you an indirect observation of a gravitational wave. So I don't know if they can be bent around objects. I'm not a theoretical physicist. I think how they measured them was having it go through objects. So I don't know if it... I don't know. That's a good thing to say in science sometimes. Laura Jasmine with 350 DKK, which I'm going to admit, I don't know what that is. Hey, Kyle. How does the proposed time crystal work? The one we hope to use in quantum computing. I have no idea. If you think you know how quantum mechanics works, you don't. That's what Richard Feynman said, and he was a genius and made an atomic bomb. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure how it works. I don't know. Thank you so much for the donation, but if I start speculating on it, I'm going to make a big mistake, and I don't want that to live on the internet forever. There's enough of me on the internet already. S13G1313, thanks for picking an easy name, says, "So I get that light is the speed limit, but why don't things accelerate towards black holes? Wouldn't it appear that light moving towards a black hole would be faster than the speed of light otherwise?" I think that is a very good question. Things do accelerate when they're going towards a black hole. So think of it like the not exactly accurate but classic representation of a black hole or something like that is the bowling ball on an elastic sheet. And so you can see when, say, if you rolled a marble around it, if you rolled a marble around the outside edge, it goes slow, but once it gets tilted down into the depression, because gravity is acting on it, pulling it down more and more, it can speed up. So objects do speed up when they get closer to this gravitational force, because gravitational force is related to the square of the distance. So as you get closer, the gravitational force goes up, and as you know, force equals mass times acceleration, more acceleration with the same mass. Bam! So why doesn't light do that? Well, light, according to special relativity, is the same velocity in all reference frames. So light is always going the speed of light. That can be warped and distorted when you're looking at it from... Well, everyone has to agree on what the speed of light is. I'll just say that. So if it's going towards a black hole and would be accelerated, it doesn't have mass in the same way. So light doesn't have mass, but it does have momentum. And so it's not this marble falling down into the depression in the same way that you or a spaceship. I have a spaceship. I don't know if you saw the beginning of the stream, but I have a spaceship. It's not exactly the same thing. Comcast John says, "Hey Kyle, love your new show. Thank you so much, and thank you for supporting a good cause today. I'm having a lot of fun talking with you all in the chat." Alexis Welsh says, "I doubt it'll be noticed again." That's where you're wrong. Okay, Kaylin Pickering says, "Hey Kyle, do you happen to have an answer for my 8-year-old?" Uh-oh. 8-year-olds, well, kids ask fantastic questions. "She has been asking me since about 5, what is gravity? She understands what gravity does, but what exactly is it?" So we kind of just talked about this. So instead of being a real force, as smart boy Isaac Newton thought, a thing pushing or pulling on something else, and it's like invisible, right? Einstein didn't like that idea. And what Einstein had the insight, Einstein's insight was, well, if you consider space-time to be something that, all the dimensions of space and time, it can have different shapes, and it can have different curves and undulations. So you can think of it, like we just said, if something has a lot of mass, and therefore gravity, it's going to, as Einstein figured, make more of a depression or a warping or a change in the slope of space-time. Now, tell your daughter that if you were sitting on the top of a hill, and then you're in your little go-kart, I don't know what kids have, and you went down the hill, what would happen? You would start going faster and faster and faster, right? As though something was pulling you. But nothing's really pulling you. You are just following this curve, this curvature of space-time, and we can call that gravity. When something is being pulled towards something else or accelerating in the presence of a planet or whatever, it's because we as objects are falling down the hill of gravity in our little go-karts, which I call a human body. I don't know what you call it. One of my Professor Emeritus, Bolwick, says, "With Lola in the facility, my very ornery pet kaiju, have you considered the use of giant mechanical robots, Gundams? How would you construct a Gundam?" I think the big problem with Gundam technology right now, Bolwick, is that there's a weight problem and there's a power problem. The weight problem is that these things would have to be so massive because we don't have ultra-efficient materials that are very strong and very light. So if it's very, very heavy, we don't have the material strength to support its own weight. Like the Pacific Rim robots, their knees should be crushed. Then there's also a power problem. So to move this massive mass around, you're going to need a lot of energy. You're talking like, again, in Pacific Rim, you're talking like nuclear reactors. And we don't have nuclear reactors that are that small and that safe, giving that much power. So we need power, and we need much better materials to handle these immense forces. Just think of the forces of just taking a step when something weighs more than the Statue of Liberty or something. Now, there's a theoretical material that could do that, but we don't have that theoretical material. I don't think even carbon nanotubes or what have you, which is some of the strongest, would stand up to those kinds of stresses. In fact, in Pacific Rim, they actually talk about that in the exactly wrong way, where they're like, I think Gypsy Danger, when they talk about it, Idris Elba's like, Gypsy Danger, old school class, no alloys. Alloys are like steel. Alloy, combining two different materials in a metal to shore up the properties to make it stronger than it otherwise would be, or harder, or more ductile. Alloys are so much better than just regular, iron. So the fact that Gypsy Danger's not using an alloy it's almost like they Wangtorio Jackson says that was not a Michael Caine impression. That was an Idris Elba impression. If you want a Michael Caine impression, I can do that too. So we're almost done with time. We have over $1,000 already donated this stream to the Center for Policing Equity. That's right, nerds. We can show them. Let's go on to our last topic. Okay. I know I'm lagging quite a bit. So there was a study released recently. Once I stop lagging, you'll see. But there was a study released recently in Nature, and this was a preview of the study because they wanted to get it out in the public so quickly, looking at the actual large-scale effects of what we're doing to try to curtail the current pandemic. And so they took data from all over the world. They projected what the rates of the virus would be without these measures and what they are now with these measures. And they were even able to individualize them. So what effect did social distancing have? What effect did closing the schools have? And I think this is going to be very illuminating because some things worked and some things didn't work. And the overarching point here is that I know so many people, in my country, millions and millions of people losing their jobs, a lot of economic hardship. It's terrible. But if there's any upside, it looks like we are making a dent in this thing. So let's look at some of the data that they found. So right here, you're seeing different countries that they looked at: China, France, Iran, United States. And based on their projections, so this is 0.0 to 0.5 projection, and that's 50%. So you can see here that in Iran, for example, they were projecting, with no measures to deal with the pandemic, a 68% increase per day. So, I mean, that's insane. 100% would be doubling. So you're almost doubling every day the number of cases if you don't do anything. That's why this is so crazy. And that's why we needed to act so quickly and kind of harshly. Now, let's look at the effect for all policies combined. So everything that we did, from shutting down schools to social distancing, what did it actually do? Well, in the United States, you can see, well, these little bars here, if you're not familiar with graphs, these little bars here are margins of error, or like confidence intervals. So it could be any of these values, but the point is all of those values are below 0, which means there is a substantial effect size. You can see here, shrinking it by 38. Or if I turn my body this way, 31% per day for the United States. This is a massive reduction in what it would otherwise be. And if we look at another one of the graphs in the paper, this is the effect of the individual policies during this pandemic. And again, I think this is really fascinating because what actually worked? This is a big learning opportunity for the entire world. This is a dress rehearsal. COVID-19, as terrible as it is, it's not as bad as it could be. And so we need to use this opportunity to see, okay, well, what actually works? On day one, when something worse comes around, what do we need to do immediately? What do we all need to get on board with? Well, let's take a look. Let's just look at the United States here. Well, you can say in China, their very drastic measures almost outpacing everyone else's in terms of reduction. And you can say, I mean, it did do something, but it was also like the biggest lockdown against people's will in the history of the world. Anyway, so up there you can see reductions, 15, 20, 22% for the emergency declaration and shutting down the whole country. But look at the United States here. So interesting effects. The slow the spread guidelines for the United States. So the CDC putting out guidelines saying, do this, don't do that. It looks like that had no effect, or it even had a slightly increase. It even slightly increased the number of cases. Now, how could that possibly be? Well, it could be that people weren't taking the information right. Maybe it wasn't written very clearly. Maybe they misinterpreted it. All of that goes into public health information, which is why it's so important to have someone that you trust, that can put full sentences together, who has a scientific background, giving press briefings every day. I'm so glad we have that. Here's another one. Paid sick leave, almost nothing. And a huge margin of error there. Isn't that interesting? That indicates to me, if I was a data scientist, it might be that there wasn't enough paid sick leave, and you're probably there's probably a lot of companies out there that were still basically encouraging that if you didn't have symptoms and you felt okay, you could come in. And we know that is a nail in the coffin in terms of COVID-19, because you can be infectious without actually presenting symptoms. School closures and religious closures and working from home. Working from home did a little bit, but look at that. School closures and religious closures almost nothing or slightly positive, adding to the number of cases. Why? Well, there's actually data on this for travel bans and shutting down schools. You need to do it very quickly. Once you start seeing cases, it spreads through the community very, very quickly. And so if you don't, shut down the schools, if we would have shut down the schools like 10 weeks before we did, then there probably would have been a larger effect here. But you can see the cost of our inaction on that, which probably cost lives. But something that I really want to point out, home isolation also working, but something what I really want to point out is how everyone, well, not everyone, certain swaths of Americans at least, are very annoyed that they have to social distance. They can't, they can't go to sporting events, and their favorite stores are closed down. They can't eat with people, and they're not supposed to gather and stuff. And, it's annoying, and I want to get a haircut. Other social distance. The single largest effect for everything that the United States has done, above and beyond everything else, social distancing has reduced the daily growth rate by an estimated 21% in the United States. Social distancing works. We need to keep doing this. Once we look at the data, we can see, okay, yes, this is a hassle, but people are dying. What can we do? Well, social distancing works. We should continue to do this sort of thing until we get a real handle on it. And then when the next terrible thing comes up, we won't be caught off guard. We'll be ready. And maybe you'll have someone talking about it that you trust with a science background. I shouldn't be able to do a better job at that. Let's go back to the chat for just a little bit more. Office hours. Joshua Goldsmith says, do you think common sense is starting to disappear? Who said it? Common sense isn't so common? I think, if you want my personal opinion, I don't think common sense is going away. I think it's being distorted and flooded out by the scourge that is social media. I think social media is completely warping our perceptions of each other, of science, of truth, and it incentivizes you to be as loud and controversial as possible for short dopamine bursts from likes and retweets that leave you feeling more hollow than you felt before you posted that stupid quote or stupid thing that you wouldn't have said that to somebody's face. I think everyone still has common sense. It's just there's a machinery at work that incentivizes us to forgo common sense and to be loud and not very thoughtful. And I think that's, I think when we look back on it, I think it's going to be one of the great mistakes, technological mistakes by creating the system that we did to monetize you as a data point. Anyway. No, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm not on social media. Amy says, could dark matter be parallel universes coexisting in the same physical space? Each universe appears as dark matter to the others and doesn't interact but can be detected. I have no idea. The interesting thing is we have no idea what dark matter is. Dark matter, we call it dark because you can't see it, doesn't interact with anything except gravitationally. So we see, for example, one of the main points of indirect evidence of dark matter is that we see galaxies spinning. And based on how much mass they have, this goes back to our gravity space-time question, based on how much mass they have, they should be spinning at a certain velocity. It turns out they're spinning a lot faster. Why? What would explain it is some amount of matter there that we can't see that would give it enough gravity to spin faster. We can't see it, we can't interact with it, and we have no idea what it is. Could it be a parallel universe? Given that parallel universes are a completely theoretical idea that has no evidence for it, I'd suggest that we'd start elsewhere first. Levi Rivers says, "Hey Kyle, do you follow Isaac Arthur? He's another YouTuber who makes a long, what am I trying to say? Very long and very in-depth science videos about mega-scale technology and futurism, and he makes fantastic videos. If you don't know Isaac Arthur, you should watch him. We happen to cover the same topic sometimes because I like mega-scale, Jupiter brains and all that kind of stuff. But more broadly, I don't really watch YouTubers in my same space because I want to be sure that I don't... that nothing bleeds over from them. I want to be unique. I want to come up with my own ideas in my own way and present them to you in a way that's, the quintessence of Kyle, ooh. So I don't watch other YouTubers because I don't want to ever like subconsciously rip something they're doing off. But I do watch a lot of other videos. I binge watch YouTube at night. I've watched every single international climbing competition final for lead and bouldering since 2014 now. It's a lot of videos. Wilder Ride says, dark matter is just lubrication of space-time that makes massive objects travel through it much more freely. Oh yeah? Prove it and win a Nobel Prize. Philip Allen says, Paul Bearvelt says, why is it we cannot process hot and cold at the same time? Well, you've ever had that sensation I've had, and it's been in a hot tub because I'm fancy. So something can be so hot that it feels cold, right? An ultra hot jet of water, impacting your skin, and it feels so hot that it's cold. It doesn't even feel hot, but it can burn you instantly. Why is that? Well, it's not that you can't process hot and cold at the same time. If you were to hold an ice cube in your hand and a match in the other, I guarantee you will figure that out. The problem is overwhelming the sensors in your skin. So there's a certain activation, as far as I understand it, there's certain activation of your skin cells, of your nerves, that you can excite them so much that it sends the wrong signal. So you're like short-circuiting, so to speak, something in there where it's getting a hot signal, hot, and then something kind of breaks down in the signaling and it sends a cold signal. So you're like overexciting it into producing a warped signal. But it's not that we can't perceive both at the same time. It's just that you are overstimulating the system, I believe. Let's take one or two more. Slash Wrath says, what if the Jupiter brain was hollow? Well, then you'd lose all the processing power. But what I think you're getting at is there's a different idea called a Matryoshka brain, which is a bunch of hollow shells of computronium, which is the densest possible computational matter. You can watch the video if you want to know. But they're spread around a star like a Dyson sphere, or like ring worlds, like Larry Niven ring worlds. And it uses the star's energy, and this would be so much bigger than Jupiter, of course, because you these huge orbits around a star. And so that's a Matryoshka brain, and that would theoretically be even more powerful. More powerful than the almighty basilisk? I don't know. So, I'm going to lag like heck here, but you know what? Let's do it anyway. So, what did we do? Well, today, of course, on Office Hours, we took all of your questions, as you're seeing now. We had amazing donations. We have over $1,000 still of donations going towards the Center for Policing Equity. In our darkest moments, science illuminates our path to justice, and I hope that we can do that today. We also talk about this physics-breaking box, which I think had a pretty simplistic, straightforward explanation, and I don't know why I made it the topic of the stream or the thumbnail, because I don't think people are going to click it afterwards, but hey, them's a science. We also talked about recursive islands, and I want you to go and find them and learn about them, because saying it, an island in a lake and a line is just fun, and it's a tongue twister. Tell it about it at Thanksgiving, if you can gather. We also talked about peer review, where I told you I have no idea what SCP is. I just happened to stumble upon the same storytelling mechanism. But I'm real, and they're not. Not the people, but like the ghosts. Because ghosts aren't real. Then we talked about what we're learning about how we're dealing with COVID-19. Much of what we're doing is working. Social distancing is working. Please continue to do it. Please continue to follow CDC and other expert voices that know how to talk bigly. And we had so much money donated. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Office Hours. If you want to join the facility, if you want to talk with me each and every day, the security team will put the link in the chat right now. I am very active on it. I do talk with everyone that I can almost every day. Videos a day earlier, your name on ARIA. Once a month, professors only live streams with me. I try to make it worth your while. So if you want to support me there, you absolutely can. And I know it's probably going to be another tough week, but I will try to provide as much entertainment and education as I possibly can. Just know that I personally and the facility always and will always stand for the seeking of truth and justice. It's going to be a tough week, but we can get through it, and we keep that in mind. Have a wonderful rest of your week. New episode coming out probably tomorrow. Until then, be nice to each other, because especially now, you and I, between us, this is all we got.